It's past midnight in Paris. The summer air is thick. The streets buzz with the hum of late-night life. But inside the Alma tunnel, beneath the glittering lights of the city of love, a black Mercedes tears through the darkness. Moments later, silence. Metal crumples against concrete. Flashbulbs ignite the scene, not from emergency crews, but from paparazzi. Too many of them. August 31st, 1997. The world stops. Princess Diana is dead. But in the days, weeks, and years that followed, one question refused to die with her. Was it an accident? Or was she silenced? The media told us it was drunk driving, that her chauffeur, Henri Paul, had alcohol in his system, that Diana's death was tragic. Yes, but nothing more than the result of a reckless escape from photographers. But deep beneath this convenient narrative lies something darker, something calculated, something that's kept a cloud over her legacy for decades. And now, for the first time, we retrace every second of that fateful night. We examine the surveillance, the testimony, the blood reports, the missing vehicles, even a chilling letter Diana wrote before her death, warning she would be killed in a car crash. And she was. 10 years after that night, the UK finally opened an official inquest into Diana's death. It would last 6 months, cost nearly £10 million, and summon a jury of 11 ordinary people to investigate what really happened. These weren't royal advisors. These weren't MI6 agents. These were regular citizens asked to decide, did Diana die in a tragic accident, or was something more sinister at play? To find out, they traveled to Paris, not for tourism, but to stand inside the Alma tunnel where the crash unfolded, to absorb its geography, its blind turns, its timing, the tunnel where that final journey ended. And what they learned would shake everything we thought we knew. In the hours before her death, Diana was being watched. 31 security cameras in the Ritz Hotel captured her every step, her every smile, her final hours with Dodi Al-Fayed. The footage shows them holding hands, laughing, moving with casual ease through the lavish corridors, blissfully unaware that they were walking straight into the final chapter of their lives. One clip freezes the world. Diana, just before she enters the elevator, turns her head and smiles at the camera. That may have been the last smile ever caught on film. But not all the footage brought comfort. Some of it, in hindsight, raised disturbing questions. Why was Henri Paul, the Ritz's deputy head of security, recalled on duty at the last moment? Why was the getaway plan changed abruptly, rerouting Diana and Dodi through the rear exit, away from prepared drivers and vetted vehicles? And why did Paul, the man officially blamed for the crash, appear completely sober in surveillance footage just minutes before he got behind the wheel, if he was, as the French police claimed, 3 times over the legal alcohol limit? How was he calmly squatting, tying his shoelaces, switching balance between legs, walking straight? He didn't stagger. He didn't slur. He didn't behave like a man too drunk to drive. But the official blood report said otherwise. And the inquest, it flagged this as a major issue. Was evidence fabricated to frame Henri Paul? Because if he wasn't drunk, the entire explanation, the one we were all sold, begins to fall apart. Then came the letter, a note written by Diana to her trusted butler, Paul Burrell. 10 months before she died, she believed her life was in danger. My husband is planning an accident in my car. Brake failure and serious head injury. She wrote that her life was entering its most dangerous phase. That someone unnamed, but heavily implied, wanted her out of the way, a cry for help, or a warning ignored. Even Diana's own lawyer at the time, Lord Mishcon, admitted he didn't believe her, until a Scotland Yard commander, Commander Jeffson, privately confessed that he did. How did she know? Was she paranoid, or simply paying attention? The days leading up to Diana's death weren't the quiet, reflective moments of someone winding down. They were electrified, full of movement, and dangerously visible. She was no longer the woman trapped inside the palace walls, a prisoner to formality and royal coldness. By the summer of 1997, she had broken away, emotionally and physically, from the royal machine. Her marriage to Prince Charles had officially ended. She was free at least. That's what the world was led to believe. But freedom for Diana came with a price. With her sons William and Harry staying behind in the UK, she accepted an invitation from Dodi Al-Fayed to vacation with his son Dodi aboard the luxury yacht Jonquil along the Mediterranean. The media painted it as a summer of indulgence, but behind the scenes, it was something else entirely. Diana, once labeled the people's princess, was now drifting further and further from the crown emotionally, ideologically, and even geographically. When paparazzi photos revealed the couple kissing aboard the yacht, speculation exploded. Was Diana finally in love again? Was she preparing to remarry? Was she some claim pregnant? That rumor would stick like glue. The engagement talk wasn't just gossip. That very weekend, Diana and Dodi walked into the upscale Rapazzi jewelry store in Paris. Dodi browsed the Dis-moi-oui collection. Translation: Tell me yes. Rings were selected. A golden band was placed in the Ritz Hotel's safety deposit box. And just like that, whispers of a royal outsider marrying the mother of a future king became thunder. But what followed was a chain of decisions so chaotic, so strangely orchestrated, that even today, no official explanation fully satisfies the timeline. On August 30th, 1997, Diana and Dodi returned from the Jonquil cruise to Paris aboard a private jet. They landed at Le Bourget Airport, where a swarm of paparazzi immediately greeted them. At the Ritz, Diana was supposed to remain low profile, but for reasons still murky, plans kept shifting. Restaurant reservations were made and then canceled. Decoy cars were arranged, scrapped, then reinstated. And just before midnight, a final, dangerous choice was made. Diana Dodi and their bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones would leave the hotel from the rear exit in a black Mercedes Estado, driven by Henri Paul. No professional security detail, no backup, and no explanation that made sense. The man entrusted with the Princess of Wales' safety was the same man the French police would later accuse of being heavily intoxicated. But was he? CCTV footage shows him behaving normally. Staff and bodyguards close to him at the time later testified that there was no odor of alcohol, no slurred speech, no unsteady movement. Even the hotel's own bartender admitted Henri Paul had just two small Ricards that night, far from enough to produce a blood alcohol level of 1.75 grams per liter, as reported later. More disturbing still is what happened in the minutes before they drove off. Henri Paul made at least 4 trips outside the Ritz to talk, some say negotiate, with members of the press waiting near Place Vendôme. Was he trying to buy them off? Was he stalling? Or was he under orders? And if so, from whom? Then there was the missing gap in his timeline. From roughly 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. that evening, no one can account for Henri Paul's whereabouts. A key detail the Inquest flagged but never resolved. The car finally pulled away from the Ritz shortly after midnight. The plan was simple: use decoy vehicles to distract the paparazzi, while Diana and Dodi slipped quietly back to his apartment on Rue Arsenhalse. But instead of taking the most direct route up the Champs-Élysées, Henri Paul steered the Mercedes toward the Seine. It was a longer, stranger route, one that forced them through the deadly curve of the Alma Tunnel. And this is where the chaos begins. At speeds estimated between 60 to 65 miles per hour, the Mercedes approached the tunnel entrance. Witnesses claimed another vehicle, a small white Fiat Uno, was seen swerving in front of the black car. Contact was made. Paint from the Fiat was found on the Mercedes frame. A side mirror was torn off. And seconds later, the car slammed into the 13th pillar of the tunnel with catastrophic force. Inside, Henri Paul and Dodi were killed instantly. Diana was critically injured, still alive, but bleeding internally. The first doctor to reach her wasn't an EMT, but a passerby, Dr. Frederick Melias, who saw the wreck and stopped his car. He provided first aid as paparazzi hovered nearby, some snapping photos before emergency personnel even arrived. One of the most haunting aspects of that night was the decision not to take Diana to the nearest hospital. Instead, the ambulance drove a longer route to Petit-Salpêtrière, citing French protocol to stabilize trauma patients en route. It took over 90 minutes from the moment of impact for Diana to reach the operating room. By the time surgeons opened her chest, the damage was too severe. Her heart had been displaced. She was pronounced dead at 4 a.m., but the questions didn't die with her. Why was the tunnel cleaned and reopened just hours later, before a full forensic investigation could be conducted? Why were 7 photographers arrested immediately, some of whose images were never returned and never seen again? Why was James Anderson, the photographer with a white Fiat Uno, known for stalking Diana, never charged, even though evidence suggests he was in Paris that night? And why, just 3 years later, did Anderson kill himself by setting fire to his own car in a remote forest, with his body so badly burned that dental records were needed to identify him? Officially, the cause of death was suicide, but his car was locked from the outside. Details like this make the accident explanation increasingly difficult to accept. As the British inquest crawled forward, more discrepancies emerged. Lord Stevens, the man tasked with heading Operation Paget, the official inquiry into Diana's death, told Henri Paul's parents face-to-face that their son would not be blamed, that he was not drunk. But just weeks later, the final report publicly declared the opposite. Why the contradiction? Was it a miscommunication or a change of narrative? Even Operation Paget acknowledged Diana had voiced fears for her safety. Multiple friends, staff members, and even her therapist confirmed she had spoken of shadowy forces, men in dark suits, surveillance, threats. But perhaps most chilling of all were the letters. One, handwritten, stated plainly, "They are planning an accident in my car." Another, addressed to her lawyer, laid out her belief that she would not live much longer, that she was being watched, that something was coming. The royal family has long dismissed these writings as evidence of paranoia. But how many paranoid people end up dying in the exact manner they predicted? Perhaps the most bitter irony is that Diana, who longed for peace after so much public chaos, became trapped in the very web of secrecy she feared. Her death, like her life, was placed under a microscope, and the deeper the world looked, the more unsettling the picture became. After Diana's death, the world seemed to stop. Crowds flooded Buckingham Palace, laying down oceans of flowers, sobbing, confused, furious. This wasn't just a tragic accident, it felt like something darker, and people wanted answers. But what they got instead was silence. Carefully measured, institutional silence. The royal family remained hidden for days. No statements, no appearances. The Queen, at Balmoral with William and Harry, was criticized for her absence. Conspiracy theories ignited almost instantly, fanned by the media and fueled by contradictions. One of the biggest questions was the white Fiat Uno. Despite over 4,000 vehicles examined, French police never found the exact car involved in the collision, and yet fragments of its tail light were recovered in the tunnel. How can a car involved in a deadly crash vanish in a city crawling with cameras and investigators? The theory that James Anderson, the French paparazzo with a history of obsessively tailing Diana, was the driver took hold. He owned a white Fiat Uno. He was reportedly near Paris that night. And then he was dead, his body burned in a locked car. Anderson had told friends he was at the Alma tunnel during the crash. His widow confirmed the story. But Lord Stevens rejected the claim, insisting there was no solid proof. Still, something didn't add up. Why did a man known for following Diana around the globe suddenly die under such disturbing circumstances? Was it guilt, fear, or was someone tying up loose ends? Meanwhile, Henri Paul, the man officially blamed, remained at the center of controversy. His reported blood alcohol level was sky high, yet multiple CCTV videos and witness testimonies described him as calm, collected, in full control. And then there's the timeline gap. No verified explanation for where he was or who he spoke to for over 2 hours before being called back to the Ritz. Who called him back in? And why him, of all people? His connection to French intelligence was real, confirmed by multiple sources. Was he acting alone? Or was he set up as a pawn in a game far larger than he realized? Adding another layer of unease was Diana's persistent fear of being killed in a car accident. Her handwritten note to her butler, Paul Burrell, was almost prophetic. "This phase in my life is the most dangerous. X is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury." She wrote that in 1996, almost a full year before her death. Her solicitor, Lord Mishcon, was so concerned about her claims that he recorded the conversation and warned police. Yet her fears were brushed off, dismissed as dramatic or delusional. Diana's paranoia, they said, was a side effect of stress. But how paranoid can someone be if their worst fears come true in the most specific way imaginable? Her ex-bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, the sole survivor of the crash, suffered massive facial injuries and memory loss. He later said he couldn't recall the events leading up to the crash, but others believe he remembered more than he let on. His refusal to fully endorse the drunk driver narrative made authorities uneasy. It's possible he was caught between loyalty, trauma, and fear. And then there's Mohammed Al-Fayed. For over a decade, he waged a relentless campaign to prove that Diana and his son Dodi were murdered. He believed the British establishment could not allow the mother of the future king to marry a Muslim man. Al-Fayed claimed MI6 had a role, that Prince Philip issued orders, and that senior royals viewed Diana as a threat to the monarchy's legacy. Many dismissed him as a grieving father desperate for justice. But some of his claims, like the involvement of British intelligence or the missing CCTV footage from the Alma Tunnel, were supported by unexplained gaps in official reports. The inquest that followed, long overdue and costing millions, was the most exhaustive in British legal history. It stretched across 6 months, polled in over 150 witnesses, and generated thousands of pages of testimony. Yet at the end, the jury delivered a familiar verdict: unlawful killing, caused by gross negligence on the part of Henri Paul and the pursuing paparazzi. Conspiracy, not proven. Murder, not acknowledged, but for many, the ruling only deepened the mystery. If Henri Paul wasn't visibly drunk and the paparazzi didn't cause the crash directly, then what really happened in that tunnel? Why was Diana's body embalmed so quickly after her death before a pregnancy test could be completed? Why were crucial cameras on the Alma Tunnel either not working or missing footage from the key moments? Why were so many documents, reports, and photographs sealed, withheld, or destroyed? The Crown insists Diana's death was a terrible tragedy, the kind that makes the world stop and question its own fragility. But a growing number of people believe there's more to the story. Something buried, something protected, perhaps even something orchestrated. Diana was more than a princess, she was a symbol, a disruptor, a mother who dared to defy the rules of the monarchy. She exposed the cracks in the crown, turned private pain into public compassion, and redefined royalty for a new generation. In life, she challenged the establishment. In death, she threatened to expose its darkest secrets. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made her dangerous. The truth about what happened that night in Paris may never be fully known. Too many pieces are missing, too many players protected, too many questions met with silence. But one thing remains certain. Diana saw it coming. She wrote it, she feared it, and she tried to warn us. The world lost a princess in that tunnel, but it also lost its last real chance at holding power accountable. And perhaps that, above all, is the greatest tragedy of them all. The Ritz at night was its own silent witness, soft carpets muffling footsteps, chandelier reflections glittering on polished marble, and shadows stretching long across opulent corridors. Picture Diana and Dodi walking between those hush-lit halls, their whispers blending with faint strains of a classical piano in the background. She's radiant in that moment, but there's an edge of quiet fatigue behind her eyes, as though she's carrying the weight of a half-formed dread. Dodi, for all his privilege, feels tense too. Not grandiose, more reserved. He seems to sense the heaviness in the air. Their chemistry is electric, but there's more to this than a summer romance. He offered her escape, glamour, choice, everything the palace couldn't. Now imagine you're watching, not unlike a juror, torn between the image and the doubt. You hear a little-known voice, Dr. Frederick Milia's, the emergency physician who pulled over that night. "I saw her through the shattered window," he later said. "I recognized her immediately. And I remember thinking, she's not meant to die like this." His words linger. You almost hear the engine's echo, the tearing metal. You feel the chill that followed. Shift to the Inquest in London. Courtroom 72, a bleak chamber under artificial lights, where 11 jurors listen day after day. File after file, chart after chart, witness after witness sworn. Some spoke dryly about alcohol content, blood analysis. Others, like Trevor Rees-Jones, stammered when asked, "I can't recall much." He paused. The silence deepened. The coroner's pen tapped softly as the guard led the witness off the stand. That pause felt endless. The jurors scribbled notes, eyes flicking. That moment stretched almost longer than the crash itself. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what if those shoelaces he tied were the first thread of a wider tapestry of unseen influence? If they were talking to paparazzi outside that night, could they have been directed? If someone called Henri back in abruptly, at the last minute, were they simply recalling a lazy guard? Or orchestrating his return? Think of the missing CCTV footage in the tunnel. Imagine jurors descending into that dim space reverberating with dripping water, with stale exhaust, with the faint hum of broken bulbs. They cross to Pillar 13 and see the scrape marks, the patched concrete, the ghostly outline of impact. One juror whispers, "I can still see them." That moment becomes part of the official record, part of the unsaid truth. Every echo there seems to ask, what happened? And who decided we could never see it all? Around that legal drama swirl the conspiracy theories. One theory frames MI6 security. Diana was about to marry Dodi, a Muslim, and a potential heir's mother. Too much risk. The palace allegedly fretted. Some whisper that protocols from the Cold War kicked and lured into the wrong act. Another theory centers on brake tampering. Picture a secret workshop in a nondescript Paris garage, where someone disabled the Mercedes brakes the night before. They weren't amateurs. They knew where it would fail. Other voices ask, if she feared a car accident, why step into one? So, willingly, every question cascades into more questions. Pause again. What would you do if the person you love told you she got a note that said, "They planned an accident in my car"? Would you demand bodyguard backups? Refuse to leave the palace? Or would you hold her hand and let her go? Fast forward to after the crash, when the ambulance didn't take her to the closest hospital. That delay became yet another riddle, officially. It was trauma protocol, stabilize on site, then take a longer route. But eyewitnesses say the nearest hospital would have been only minutes away. Mounting minutes that turned into an hour, and 43 more minutes before she reached the operating table. Each tick of the clock feels like another question screaming, was every second used to protect her? Or hide something else? Now breathe with me. You're in the jury's place. Halfway through 6 months of testimony, you weigh medical charts against heartbeats lost. Brave photography crews argue their innocence even as they replay flashes and screams. The coroner reminds everyone, the world is watching. But look at evidence, not headlines. That tension, that relentless question of who controls the narrative becomes the heartbeat of the film. In the aftermath, Diana's funeral in London was a global moment, crown pages of history. But even there, questions lingered about what happened immediately after she died. Was the body embalmed too quickly? Was a pregnancy test performed? We may never know. But her legacy, her influence on mental health, tabloid regulation, charitable outreach grew stronger by the day. Her death prompted reforms, police introspections, media responsibility debates. And yet the ability to answer the central question, accident or assassination, remains elusive. So here we stand, 35 minutes in, and we still hadn't reached the heart of the storm, because that heart is still beating beneath secrecy. Shaped by power, politics, bureaucracy, and the unspoken will to preserve the image of a monarchy, Diana's last hours were more than chaos. They were a collision of forces: royal privilege, media hunger, intelligence networks, grief, fear, control all clashing in the dark. In the end, what are we watching when we watch Diana's story? A love cut short, a mother posthumously accused, a system covering its tracks, or the final act of someone who looked into the abyss and warned us about what she saw? In the hush after the inquest, a curious silence fell over those who had whispered about Diana's fate for so long, but beneath that silence remained a new tension, like the calm after a storm that never quite passed. Investigators spoke of hidden documents, late-night phone calls, embassy cables, obfuscated transcripts, new whispers that surfaced only under oath, then vanished into sealed court files. And in museums of memory across the globe, there's a photo of Diana smiling in Marrakesh, taken just weeks before she died, her eyes alight with a daring sense of freedom, unaware that she was walking into a labyrinth of shadows. Scrolling through archived news footage, you hear journalists debating whether the monarchy would courageously face the truth or quietly bury it. Experts on international law point out that the inquest verdict in lawful killing through negligence left no room for convictions, no accountability for anyone beyond Henri Paul and a handful of photographers. Yet even that verdict was phrased as an afterthought, more resigned than resolved. Meanwhile, tabloid culture never paused, it surged. Paparazzi protocols were re-examined, professional press guidelines strengthened, and yet the hunger for images, any images of the powerful, remained insatiable. Diana's death became the grim blueprint for celebrity vulnerability. Add to this the emotional resonance her sons carried forward, William and Harry, still in their early 20s when their mother died, spent years processing grief amid scrutiny. William championed bereavement services, Harry launched causes around mental health and restraint in media behavior. Their actions cast long shadows over the palace's public relations strategies and justice responses. Reflect on this. Diana died because she loved to loudly in a world that demanded her to be silent. Yet her death became the catalyst for change in laws and hearts, in how we perceive the obligation of privilege. Now replay her last words spoken to bodyguards as she slipped into that Mercedes. Hold my hand, a plea of trust, a signal of vulnerability, a dramatic echo into eternity. The film fades out on that, but also on the flicker of cameras around the Mercedes, the cold concrete of the tunnel walls, and the silent clock ticking into unanswered questions. And as the screen fades, a final line grips the viewer. We may have lost a princess that night, but perhaps we never lost the courage to ask, why? And as long as people keep asking, the story of what really happened that night in Paris will never be truly over. Thanks for watching. If you believe the truth still matters, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because in a world of silence, curiosity is our loudest weapon.